Hey guys, thanks for clicking on another video. So in this one, I want to talk to you about an exciting update from the independent micro brand Richard LeGrand. Now, if you're familiar with my channel, you might be aware that earlier this year, I reviewed their Mark III iteration of their popular dive watch, the Oceanfarer, which was an excellent value proposition, and they actually improved it even more by addressing some of the minor critiques that consumers had and based on my own personal feedback. So in fact, this latest version of the Oceanfarer now comes in 3 different colorways. Personally, I love the one in front of me. This is the polar white dial. But if you check on their website, you can also find it in a blue or black colorway. Now, full disclosure here, I did reach out to Richard LeGrand and request that they send in this watch for their review. And I was pretty stoked when they replied by sending me this polar white version for the review and to hang on after the review is over. Now, I don't think that's going to affect my personal feelings about this watch, but please keep that in mind throughout the review portion of this video. So I'm excited to share my personal thoughts of this particular timepiece, but at the end of the day, this watch comes in at $389 US, and at that price point, it still packs quite a punch, and I think makes just a great everyday vintage-inspired diver. So let's flip the camera around right now, and you guys get to see this watch up close in my studio. Okay, so now we're in my studio. We get to check out the Richard LeGrand Oceanfarer up close. And as you can see, it's just a beautiful watch. I'll briefly mention the key updates that they made because they do seem quite subtle, but they're very substantial with respect to how it wears and feels on wrist. So you can actually see now they have a female end link on the bracelet. So you can actually pull the bracelet straight down, and it doesn't extend the lug-to-lug length at all, so it makes it extremely wearable. Very good articulation with this bracelet. You can see that it folds completely flat over to the case back. And then as far as sizing the bracelet goes, this was one of my other critiques because they use a pin and collar system, but the collar and the center link here is so large that I had a hard time sizing it on the Mark III. So what they did is actually provided you with a complete pin punch system to remove the pin and collar from each of the links. So you can see they actually give you the hammer and the pin punch tools, and it did make sizing the bracelet quite easy to do, and you can get a very good fit with this watch now, not only because the links are small, but because the clasp is so refined, and you have 6 layers of micro adjustment here as well. And there's also some subtle changes to the dial as well compared to the Mark III version of the Oceanfarer that came out at the beginning of 2020. Specifically, the amount of text has increased by 1 line, and I do think it fills out the dial a little bit better. Now, on the website, Richard LeGrand also mentioned that they updated the handset to give it more of a chamfer or a fine delineation for the outline of the hands, although upon my inspection I don't really notice anything too different compared to the Mark III. I do like the pop of red that's on this polar white dial with the tip of the second hand there and the printing of the Oceanfarer above the 6 o'clock position. So aside from those changes, everything else is pretty much standard when you're comparing it to the Mark III. Very nice case dimensions, 40mm case diameter. And then if you look at the side profile, lug to lug here is 46mm, and that's a true 46 now with the female articulating end links here. Whereas with the Mark III, you had the male end links that protruded and extended the true lug to lug by a little bit. Now, case thickness, if you measure from the top of the bezel to the bottom of the case back, the website says it's 11.5mm. If you include the slightly domed sapphire crystal, it's 12.5mm. And you can see that there's nice anti-reflective application to that sapphire crystal as well. And then the lug opening here for the supplied bracelet is a universal 20 millimeters. And if you do want to swap out the bracelet for something different, they also provide a nice rubber tropic strap here. Now I will briefly mention that the spring bars that are provided for the rubber here are bent spring bars because the fitment of the lugs to the actual head of the watch here, it's a bit of a tight fit. So if they were going to improve this watch in subsequent iterations, I would perhaps suggest that you extend the lug length a little bit so you get really nice clearance for secondary strap options. Now as far as the dial design, I really think they got a winning formula here. This is a no-date diver. You got the quarter Arabics on the dial with a 12, 3, 6, and 9. And the rest of the indices are also applied, and they're just simple batons. As I mentioned, you got very traditional sword-style hands for the hour and minute hand. And I just love that spade-shaped second hand with that pop of red. And I like how the red seconds hand just extends all the way to the periphery of the dial there. You also have a very clean minute track that runs along the periphery of the dial. Now as far as the bezel goes, they went with a 120 click unidirectional bezel with a sapphire capped insert that's loomed, and the bezel action remains excellent. It's quite audible and clicky as well, but the alignment on it is excellent. The grip for this bezel has always been good, and there's also no backplay there either. And as far as overall legibility goes, I think this watch is extremely easy to read. I like how they went with a black bezel insert against the white backdrop of the dial, and everything on the dial has a nice black surround to it. As far as loom goes, the loom on it is quite good. It's BGW9 across the board here, so you do get that nice blue glow on the dial, the hands, and on the bezel insert as well. I will say that the loom on the bezel does fade a little bit faster than it does on the dial itself. But again, overall, you're not going to have a hard time reading this guy in the dark. And as far as case finishing goes, I'm extremely impressed at how much they can achieve for a sub $400 watch. Just look at those clean brushed lines on the flanks of the case here. And then you have a nice gorgeous polished bevel that transitions to the tops of the lugs, and the brushing on the lugs and kind of a satin finish on the bracelet does play with the light very well. Additionally, the finishing on the crown with the RL Richard LeGrand logo is quite nice, and then the case back has a nice stamped 3D etching of a diver's bell and some crossed anchors here. And I'll just quickly mention the automatic movement in this timepiece. It does help that they went with a Miyota 9039 with respect to keeping the case thickness down. It's a fairly thin movement. It's a high beat or 4 Hertz movement with about a 42-hour power reserve. I believe it's got 24 joules, and you can manually wind it if you unscrew the screw down crown here. Quite smooth operation of this crown too. And because it's a no date movement, you just pull it out once and you can stop the seconds or hack the movement, and then you can quickly set to any reference time you'd like. And rethreading the crown is no problem whatsoever. There are no crown guards, and the knarling on the crown is very nice. So here's a quick wrist shot of the Richard LeGrand Oceanfarer on my 7.5-inch wrist, or about 19 centimeters in circumference. And as you can see, it wears extremely well, and the fit and finish for this watch is very impressive as far as micro-brand divers go. So in closing, I do appreciate that most micro-brands, including Richard LeGrand, try and improve their models and respond to consumer feedback after each iteration of their watch is released. And by updating the bracelet, I do think they've addressed the comfort on this watch It's a really nice size at 40 millimeters. I think many different wrist sizes can wear this watch comfortably. As far as future improvements go, it would be nice to have the lugs maybe just a tad longer, just so you don't need bent spring bars if you want to swap in a NATO or like a leather strap for this particular watch. And then this is just a personal preference, but I still find that the applied indices and printing on this dial is a bit small for my liking. I think maybe they could add an applied Richard LeGrand logo and increase the overall font across the dial a little bit, and I think that would go a long way with overall legibility. But aside from that, guys, I can easily recommend this watch if you're looking for something that's sub $400 and checks all of the boxes with respect to a dive watch with great build quality and materials. But as always, I'd love to hear your feedback in the description of this video. And if you like this video, please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. It helps me out a lot, and that way you'll be staying up to date on future reviews on my channel. So until next time, guys, stay safe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.